Hello and welcome to the BloodStream podcast. My name is Patrick James Lynch and you are listening to another BloodStream Mini.
We had about 100 participants from all over the country. It was pretty fantastic. It was kind of the first published modern 360-degree look at the bleeding disorders community.
That voice belongs to filmmaker and Believe Limited co-founder Ryan Gielen, who joins me later to discuss the new Bleeding Disorders time capsule that Believe is rolling out this summer. The time capsule is intended to capture stories and perspectives that together represent a snapshot of the bleeding disorders community in 2020 from as many points of view as possible. More on that with Ryan in just a little bit. First, I'll be joined here by Believe's Director of Outreach and fellow podcaster Amy Board to discuss a snapshot of our community in a very different sort of way. Last year, Amy and a team from Believe Limited accompanied Save One Life, the international bleeding disorders charity that provides direct relief and services to families in poverty, on trips to India and the Philippines to capture the stories of young men with bleeding disorders whose lives have been remarkably impacted thanks to the work of Save One Life. Amy was there as writer-director of a video series Save One Life is producing, profiling their scholarship program. In the last couple of weeks, these 3 to 4 minute videos have begun to roll out, and so I asked Amy to join me this week, not to discuss mental health or ask the expert or any of our typical topics, but rather to learn more about her experience working on these projects and being a part of these trips, both of which were entirely new experiences to her. And to be honest, and I maybe shouldn't admit this as her boss, she and I haven't ever really debriefed these trips, not really. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this conversation goes. So, speaking of that conversation, which actually hasn't happened yet at the time I'm recording this, so that's exciting. That's coming up here next, right after I remind you that BloodStream is made possible by Takeda. To learn more about Takeda, their support of the bleeding disorders community, and their response to COVID-19, have you heard of it? Visit bleedingdisorders.com. Once again, get a pen. That's bleedingdisorders.com. Okay, let's talk to Amy. All right, I'm joined now by my colleague, Amy Board, who you hear on BloodStream with mental health segments or to talk about Ask the Expert. But now we're here to talk about something completely different, this project that she spearheaded with Save One Life, which, as I just mentioned in the intro, she and I never really discussed like professionally in a really thorough way at all. So we're doing a little bit of our professional catch-up work here live for all of you, and I'll start that with asking Amy, what was your first thought when we approached you about this project?
Well, it was interesting because coming from a nonprofit background, when I heard of the opportunity when we had our first brainstorming meeting with Save One Life about this project, I had a lot of thoughts and opinions about what the content should be used for. And, you know, I was new in the job, so I didn't feel completely comfortable to say anything with authority. But I remember, you know, having like one paragraph at the end being like, you know what, if this content isn't utilized for generating revenue, you know, years and years from now, it'll be a wasted opportunity. I think that was like the one thing I said in the meeting. And then afterwards, when it was just Believe, I was very vocal about what I thought it should be. And you guys were hilarious in that you guys all heard it. Everybody like took it in. And then like later, I think both you and Ryan were like, okay, so why don't you write the proposal then, sucker? It was very funny. But so that was kind of, I had a lot of thoughts. So when when the opportunity came to kind of spearhead this project, it was the first project really at Believe, save for Ask the Expert, that I was asked to spearhead. It was exciting and it was also terrifying. I mean, I've never actually done this before. And I have you know, it's just so funny. You have a lot of opinions and you're like, this is how it should be. And then when you get the opportunity, it's like jumping into the deep end, which was the best possible thing that could have happened to me. I think professionally was just was having a team supportive and strong enough around me to just push me into the deep end. It was really good.
Something people may not know about you, though, Amy, your background in nonprofits and with policy has come up on the show, but you do also have a creative background. So it's not as though this creative work was totally out of left field, albeit you've never been to another country to write and direct a video before. But can you share with people a little bit about your creative background?
Yeah, I've been an actor since I was 9. I discovered it when I was 9 and really didn't think I was good at anything else. I don't think that was true, but I was so praised as, this young performer, this like bubbly young performer, that I just latched onto it and I loved it, and went to undergrad for musical theater and then performed professionally for a little under a decade doing musical theater, like doing the grind. And it's been interesting to make several shifts in my professional life. I was so uncomfortable with it at first. I felt like it was a failure, like I couldn't figure out what to do. And now looking back on it, it's one of my favorite things about my story is that I've had the opportunity to have almost 3 careers. So this place in Believe is so fun because it's blending 2 of my things. And I love that. I have grown up telling stories as an actor. So through just the lens of one person, I've created characters, I've created humans and tried to make them as 3-dimensional as possible. That's how I, cut my teeth in storytelling. And this is very, very different. This is visual. This is big picture. And it felt very intuitive. The second that I stepped onto that, interview spot in India, it felt very intuitive. I was like, oh, I understand what I'm doing. And at the same time, coming back from it, the skills that I needed were so different from anything that I've done, which I love. It's been one of the most enjoyable things in my like adult professional career was doing this project.
That's amazing. So what were some of your expectations? And I guess more to the point, what from the trip most surprised you?
The thing that most surprised me initially, in particular in India, was I knew what I wanted. I knew some of the sentences that I wanted them to say. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I knew I wanted them to share what this scholarship, what Save One Life as an organization has meant to them. And I thought it was going to be really tricky. So I had like 50 different questions of how to draw this out of these young men, of just trying to get, I very specifically knew what I wanted. And they spoiled me. The men in India, in particular, the first few days, it was intuitive to them. It was so authentic and genuine. I didn't have to draw anything out, and it was very surprising and really wonderful. It was really wonderful, and how they have articulated what that organization has meant for them is. It was authentic and it was genuine and it wasn't put on, and it was marvelous. They were marvelous.
What are some of the things people said about what Save One Life means to them?
The assistance and the support, and I think the one-on-one relationship building that Save One Life provides, not only with founder Lori Kelly and with executive directors like Chris Bombardier. I think they utilize program partners. In a country like India, the program partner there is a volunteer, and she is marvelous. And she knows all of these families, these young men, these young women by name, and it feels personalized. And I think, the mission of the organization and what they have decided to contribute to, knowing how the other larger organizations function, is so specialized to the family just living day by day. And so everything that you give as a donor to Save One Life immediately affects the life of that child and that family. And I've in the nonprofit sphere, it's very hard to find organizations where you can attach your support so seamlessly. And it was such a joy to bring a camera crew there to showcase that professionally with photos and with video and with story. So it was wonderful.
What videos have come out thus far, and is there anything notable that you want to highlight in them?
We decided as a group, along with Save One Life, that we were going to highlight 4 countries in this this opportunity, in this funding opportunity. And so we have done 2 countries out of the 4. We went to India and we went to the Philippines in the same trip, which was Looney Tunes.
Why was it
gone
Looney
like
Tunes?
16 days. It was great. We can talk about that later. But I very much, my vision for this really wanted to highlight the individual culture of the country as well. So each video not only telling the story of the scholarship program and what the organization means to these young men and women and their families, but also the unique beauty of the culture of each country. And India has such a rich, beautiful culture that everyone that lives and breathes and moves in that country is surrounded by that culture. And the Philippines was so vastly different than what I had anticipated. I think anybody could have anticipated. And the emotional tenderness of these young men when we sat down took everybody back. I don't think anybody was ready for what those young men shared.
And why do you think that emotional tenderness was so prevalent, whereas it sounds like India, that wasn't the case?
I think in the Philippines, and I don't want to speak for them, but I don't think they get the opportunity to speak like this very much. They were very aware of the unique opportunity that this provided. And I also think that there are places in the world that have some catch up to do in terms of treatment, in terms of access to treatment. And I think the Philippines is one of those countries. And so the realities of living with hemophilia in the Philippines was very painful and extremely isolating. And many of these young men had very gruesome stories about their hemophilia. And, unexpected gift of being able to afford a college degree was something that I think changed their outlook, not only physically, but their mental health as well.
And in the videos, they not only speak to that, but the way in which they speak to that, the emotion and the energy that comes through from the various men who are featured, it's quite clear the impact that Save One Life Scholarship Program has had on their life. And to your point, the impact it's had on their vision of themselves, their mental well-being, and all the rest. Coming back to your putting the creative hat a little bit to the side and coming back to the advocacy hat a little bit, did you learn anything from this experience as an advocate that your prior work on the chapter level and in other ways had not either brought forward to you, or having this new identity allowed you to focus on something in a different way or receive it in a different way? Any ways in which you as an advocate grew from this experience?
That's a fantastic question. And in all honesty, I think it's very different when you're there and you meet these people. It gives advocacy a new weight. I would imagine you would say the same thing, and Chris Bombardier would say the same thing. It broadens your worldview in a way that's really important and uncomfortable in a way. But for me, it gave me the opportunity to actually to trust my voice, to trust my vision with some of that stuff. I think the more experience I get, the more people that I meet, I can more confidently speak as an advocate with authority and with honesty behind it. And so it just added to that experience, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And then I suppose putting the creative hat back on and thinking about your work in content creation as a filmmaker, as a podcaster, can you pinpoint things that you have learned as a creative, and a creative who's working at Believe, trying to create entertainment that impacts people and makes a change? Have you learned things as a creative from this process that have influenced your other work?
Absolutely. I think I think one of the strongest things is telling the story visually rather than shoving it in the audience's face all the time. And that was a shift. That was a shift. You don't necessarily have to have someone say it, but to visually create, there are many different ways that you can set something up. There are many different ways that you can support what someone is saying. And so visually, I had honestly, in this trip, I left the cameramen, I let them do what they wanted to do. I gave them a little bit, this is my vision. This is what I'd like for you to capture. But it was such a learning lesson coming back and putting these together and seeing, some of the storyline. And again, to trust myself to say, I really want this to support this. Visually, I want to tell the story this way. So that was very important. And then I hope Ryan Gielen listens to this, because he harks on it all the time. And he's taught me such great things of...
Well, he's the next guest coming up, so the chances of him hearing it are better than usual.
That's great. Gielen, this is for you. To have a beginning, middle, and end, to have a first, second, third act. And, as an actor, you just blindly go in, you just say the lines, you just try to be as funny and charming, whatever you're supposed to be.
That's acting process 101 for anybody who's curious.
That's it. That's all you're just trying to do. And this is a different kind of storytelling, and there's more technique to it, I think, in a way, or there's different technique to it. And that beginning, middle, and end is really important. This, the elements of trying to tell a story to get someone to give felt very intuitive to me. And it's been interesting taking other projects, watching people craft story and create those acts has been terrific. It's so fun. So fun. I like my job. Thanks for hiring me.
Yeah, no problem. I'll try to check in with you sooner than 8 months after things end to debrief them. I also do want to give a quick shout out to Sanofi Genzyme, whose support of the scholarship program is, what makes the engines go, and whose support enabled Amy and the Believe team to travel with Save One Life, to collect this footage, to work with Save One Life on how to get their messaging across through the videos that Amy's directing and fill out this campaign. So thank you to Sanofi Genzyme, both on behalf of Believe and for Save One Life. Amy, as we start to wrap up, I'm gonna throw you a little bit of a softball-y kind of question here, and take it where you will. Why, if this isn't already obvious, why should people watch these videos, and where can they find them?
First of all, you can find them on any of Save One Life's channels. You can find them on their website, and you can find them also on Facebook and on Instagram. You can search Save One Life, and they will be there. I think expanding worldview is very important, and these videos are our window into that. And Chris says this all the time, but we are all bound to the country, the family, the place, the origin that we are born into. And having a chronic illness like hemophilia is very different in developing countries across the world. And I think it's important for us to pay attention and to educate and to know our good fortune of being born in the U.S. Gives us a bit of a responsibility to extend support to others. And what terrific, wonderful, engaging, innovative people live with hemophilia and are really, really thriving because of Save One Life.
And thriving in part because the opportunities available to people in countries like India and the Philippines, professionally speaking, are often in manual labor or otherwise physical jobs that are not okay for people with bleeding disorders, especially if you have a lack of access to medication. So cannot be emphasized enough the importance of education and these scholarships to enable these young men to go to university, to develop skills, to enter the workforce and become productive members of their society. So it's critical work, as Amy said. Across all of Save One Life's channels, you'll find the videos. We'll also have a link here in the program notes. And I should mention that the latest guest on the Ask the Expert podcast with Amy is NHF CEO Len Valentino. Amy, was there anything about Len that you learned in that interview that you didn't know?
First of all, I was a nervous wreck for the first like 20 minutes. I don't know why, but he just seemed so fancy. And he was not fancy. I mean, I don't want to say that he's not wonderful, but like, I don't know, for some reason, like he really made me nervous, which was super dumb. And he was like, please call me Len. And I'm like, I'm going to call you Dr. Valentino. So that's a thing. And bless his heart, he was very kind. But I think he has the coolest career and trajectory. I was unaware of it before he became CEO at NHF, and I think he is uniquely suited to lead our largest national organization. I think he's going to be patient-centered, which not to say that other, leadership in the organization hasn't been, but he is going to be patient-centered with a clinical view, which is just going to be great. I think I am fascinated to see how he handles just the nonprofit day to day, but I don't think the role requires him to do too much over governance and over fundraising. He has a tremendous staff that that's really going to, I think, thrive underneath a leader like that. So what comes out of NHF in the next 5 years is going to be really exciting and very beneficial for the patient community. And I hope that they start to feel more heard and more seen as we continue to go on this path. I hope that is the outcome. But he's great, and he's great. So anyway.
Well, excellent. You can hear that at bloodstreamexpert.com or bloodstreammedia.com. Follow the links to Ask the Expert. It is in two parts. Part one, a little bit more on his expertise. Part two, a little bit more on who Len or Dr. Len Valentino himself is. So check that out as well. Amy, thanks for a few minutes, and we will talk to you again very soon.
As always, thank you.
And now we'll speak to Believe Limited co-founder, BloodStream Media co-founder Ryan Gielen about the Bleeding Disorders time capsule. You may remember Ryan. He is one of the voices on the Factor Revolution that we just recently re-aired. He was also on the pod a few weeks ago to talk about the Teen Impact Awards, and before that, enrollments for the ACA in early 2020. So just a couple of times you may have heard from Ryan already this year. And let's hear from him now about the Bleeding Disorders time capsule. Ryan, there's a lot of things we share, including much of the Believe Limited journey and story that I think you're going to touch on here in just a minute. But it occurs to me during quarantine, one thing we really don't share is the experience within the household. So as a guy without children, Natalie and I are having one kind of experience right now. But for you and Katie, Robin, and River, how you holding up? How you doing?
That's fair, but you're not giving yourself enough credit. You have a 40-pound puppy that is an absolute wild man. So you're putting in your time too. It's a little crazy over here. Right as literally a week after my second child was born on March 6th, we went into lockdown. So his life hasn't been any different really than it would be. He's not really going to have a lot of adventures at 1 month old, but my 3-year-old is going bananas and is dying to get back to school. So we're just I think everybody in our position is just trying to find little adventures, little fun ways to make it interesting for the kids. But at 3 months in, we're just we're running out of good ideas. If you have any, let me know, because we're
mailbag at bloodstreammedia.com. I think last I saw him earlier this week, he was in an astronaut's uniform. Has there been a career change in his life?
No, we've hit the costumes phase. We are out of arts and crafts. We are now buying costumes from Amazon and just trying to find any way to play with those that's fun.
So Ryan, I mentioned just before we jumped into our conversation that the Bleeding Disorders time capsule, in essence, is a snapshot of the community. Can you expand upon that a little bit? What is the Bleeding Disorders time capsule intended to capture, and why are we doing it?
Yeah, so when I started working in hemophilia, when you and I started Believe Limited, it was about roughly 2012. And there were websites with really specifically tailored info, like stuff on why prophy is important, websites or web pages on why exercise is important, websites devoted to the history of hemophilia, but there wasn't sort of a big, clear snapshot of the entire community for me to look at where I could kind of catch up with people who had been working in hemophilia for years or people who had been living with hemophilia there just were no cliff notes, no compiled data. There wasn't that big thing that I could turn to and just study over the weekend and like really feel like I had absorbed a lot of experience. So really for 3 straight years, you and I just kind of hit the road. We went to chapter meetings, special events, national meetings. We interviewed families all over the country for videos and then podcasts. And after about 3 years of kind of nonstop meeting people and traveling, I felt like, you've heard me say this a bunch of times, but I started to feel like an adopted community member, which was an honor. And so for the first year, 2015, we had about 100 participants from all over the country. It was pretty fantastic. It was kind of the first published modern 360-degree look at the bleeding disorders community. And I think in doing that, we realized we could do a lot more with this. We can make it bigger. And that's kind of what I want to do, that's kind of what we want to do here in 2020. We want to go bigger. We want to pull in more voices and really create this powerful time capsule for people this year and 5, 10, 20 years down the road. I mean, imagine in 2012, when I started, imagine if I could look at a 60, 70 page collected voices document or book from 1965, then 1975, 1985, to go through direct quotes and voices from the people who were living at that time and experiencing it in real time would have been an incredibly powerful way for me to kind of get to know the community. So I think that's what we're trying to duplicate. And the only way we can do that is with the people who are listening to this, with your voices. We need your voices to tell us what you are experiencing right now and what you think the future might be like, what your hopes for the future are. Because we do want to kind of create that powerful living document that people are going to come back to year after year and honestly, decade after decade.
So where can people go to learn more about it or to contribute?
So there's no way to shorten this like in a fun way. So we just said, you know what, let's do it. bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com. That will redirect you to a place where you can choose which questionnaire you want to fill out. You can fill out the family questionnaire, family member or patient questionnaire. You can fill out the questionnaire for caregivers, and you can fill out the questionnaire for industry. The questions are somewhat similar, but they are tailored in a way for each group so that when we represent that information back to the world, it's clear who it's coming from. And we obviously delineate that in the Bleeding Disorders Time Capsule. It just feels important to us to try to hear from everybody so that in the future, when people look back, they will know who was here, who was doing what did it really feel like from the real voices of people living it. And in that way, we think we can create something really valuable. So it's bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com.
bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com. A mouthful, but not complicated. bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com. Do people have to give much of their personal information to do this? Do they have to fill out forms or opt into anything? Can you talk a little bit about the information piece?
That's a great question. So no, everything can be de-identified. It's an option you have when filling out the form. Would you like this to be de-identified? That's not a problem at all. We don't share your information with anybody. We keep it internally. And then the most you will ever hear from us afterwards is we will add you to our mailing list, which is focused on hemophilia related content, bleeding disorders related content, like when we have a new podcast series coming out, or when the Teen Impact Awards is looking for submissions for next year, when the Breaking Through Musical program, the music and art therapy program has submissions open, and we want to know, do you know any teens who'd like to participate? So the option is always yours to have it de-identified. And then the most you'll hear from us is when an exciting opportunity or a new amazing piece of content is coming out.
So we talked at the top, Ryan, about how you've had you have 2 children, one born just ahead of this quarantine, one who's 3 years old, but neither of whom who were around in 2015, the last time that we did the Bleeding Disorders Time Capsule, and now we're here in 2020. So for you, as an adopted member, if you were filling this out right now, what would you be emphasizing? What has changed? What has stuck out to you in the last 5 years that's different from 2015?
That's a great question. I think on a sort of micro scale, what's super interesting is on the first time capsule, we referred to it as a snapshot of hemophilia in 2015, even though we called it Bleeding Disorders Time Capsule, right? It was a snapshot of hemophilia right there on the cover in big letters, but we wouldn't do that this year. So kind of on a micro level, that's one really interesting change to me is in the 5 years since we did this, even the National Hemophilia Foundation changed the name of their big conference to the Bleeding Disorders Conference, to BDC, right? And it caused a little confusion, but people are starting to catch up. We understand that the entire hemophilia, quote unquote, world is aware of the need for much more inclusivity. That started with, I'm sure, the need to think more about women with bleeding disorders, von Willebrand disease, and the lack of proper diagnosis of VWD. But as we become more inclusive, one of the things that seems to be happening as you kind of open people's eyes to the need to be more inclusive is more factor deficiencies, more people with bleeding disorders start to come into the fold. And the dialogue expands and the power of the group expands. So that's something that I've noticed has changed. Like we just like NHF, we're changing the name of this product. We're pulling out the word hemophilia and making it clear it's bleeding disorders, just so that there's no ambiguity, and so that people who live with VWD know that this time capsule is for them too, right? People with rare factor deficiencies know that this time capsule is for them too. And that's a powerful statement now. And I think it'll be a really interesting marker 10, 20, 30 years from now to see that this big change that no doubt defines a better, more inclusive bleeding disorders community for the next 10, 20, 30 years happened between 2015 and 2020, right? Right around 2017, 2018, people really put a marker down and said, no, we really need to think about how big our community actually is. The hemophilia community is one of the strongest rare disease communities there is, if not the best organized. And that's without a constant, like, big, focused effort to be inclusive to all bleeding disorders. So that's one of the really interesting changes, I think.
And as I hear you say that too, I think about the treatment advancements that have been made in hemophilia and in von Willebrand disease in the last 5 years. We've had 2 world congresses, and by the time June rolls around, we'll have had a third, the virtual one this year from the WFH. There have been a lot of things that have changed. We've had a new administration come in, and that's affected healthcare and health policy and funding in different ways. So much happens over 5 years. It's incredible how quickly it goes by. But then if there is, you made the point earlier, if when we started, there was a 1965 capsule and a 1970 and a 1975, just how extraordinarily valuable if there's an entity who every 5 years is saying, I know it's a lot of work, I know it's a little annoying, but if you go to bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com, we can help add to this thing that will be of value for our community for years and decades to come. And that's extraordinary. It's amazing to be able to offer that. So again, that's bleedingdisorders.com. You can opt in to receive a heads up when this is made available, be a part of the mailing list. You can have your information de-identified. It's totally your choice. Just before we go, Ryan, another thing that the quarantine has affected is entertainment and the entertainment industry. And I'm thinking now about My Beautiful Stutter, which people have heard us talk about in the podcast before. As a reminder, My Beautiful Stutter documentary about these kids who stutter and this exceptional program that has served them. We followed them for a number of years. Ryan produced and directed the film. It's played at festivals all over the place. There's actually been a little bit of news. I'm realizing as I'm asking you this question, I am setting you up to share a little bit of news. So let's start there. What news do we have?
Yeah, thank you for the shameless plug. You saved me from having to jam it in there at the end without you asking. So My Beautiful Stutter, one of them, obviously about 2 years ago, as we were getting into post-production on the film, Paul Rudd joined as an executive producer. That's the Paul Rudd, Ant-Man. And George Springer, the 2017 World Series MVP, joined as an executive producer. And these folks did this after we had finished filming because they wanted to help us get it out into the world. The film has started to get out into the world through film festivals. And in the last week, Mariska Hargitay, the television star, Law and Order SVU, and her husband, Peter Herman, who have a son who stutters, saw the film, loved it, and decided to join as executive producers as well. So we're going into the release of the film, hopefully in the late fall, early winter of this year, with a really, really strong group of executive producers who we hope will help us get it out pretty far and wide.
Awesome. So great news there. And mybeautifulstutter.com if you want to keep up with that after you go to the bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com. Ryan, thanks again for coming on. Thanks for your work on the time capsule. And here's hoping for a great year. I think we're going to get a strong number of submissions, and we'll continue to build on this thing that, to your point, years from now will be something that families can look back on and have a sense of what's gone on in this community over the last number of decades.
Yeah, thank you. And thank everyone listening in advance for lending your voice to this. We can't wait to hear from you.
So let's recap. Visit SaveOneLife.net and click the widget. I love that word, widget. Click the widget for their YouTube channel to watch the 3-minute videos profiling scholarship recipients and fellow blood brothers in India and in the Philippines. Visit bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com, the shortest website you'll type in all day, bleedingdisorderstimecapsule.com, to contribute to the 2020 Bleeding Disorders Time Capsule. Visit mybeautifulstutter.com, much shorter title compared to My Bleeding Disorders Time Capsule. Now I'm going to confuse things. Bleeding Disorders Time Capsule. Then visit mybeautifulstutter.com to learn about Believe Limited's feature documentary, directed by Ryan, and visit BloodStreamExpert.com, where the most recent Ask the Expert episodes from Amy feature interviews with NHF CEO Len Valentino. So is that enough places for you to visit? No, really? Wow. All right. Well, then how about one more? Visit bleedingdisorders.com to learn about the resources made available to the bleeding disorders community by Takeda, the presenting sponsor of the BloodStream podcast. bleedingdisorders.com for more on Takeda and their response to COVID-19. Lastly, we had a very nice response to the short meditation we used to end the previous episode featuring Debbie, so we decided to offer another 2-minute meditation to close out today's episode. So, if you're interested, and it's safe to do so, I'll invite you now to close your eyes and to feel your body, feel your breath. Don't do anything, just notice yourself. And start to bring a little more attention to your breath. Inhale for 4 seconds. And out for 4 seconds. And now this time, inhale for 4 seconds. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. And release your breath for 4 seconds. Do this another couple times, and just keep bringing your focus back to the breath. As you see your mind wander, just come back to the breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, repeat. And now think of a place that you have shared a special moment with someone in your family. Where were you? What was going on? How did you feel that day? Do you remember what you were thinking about? Do you remember what the sun or the moon or the sky felt like? If you quiet your mind for a moment, can you hear the voice of the person you were with? What does it sound like? Were there any animals or insects around during that time? Was there a rainfall or a gust of wind that hit your body? Notice what it does to you internally to be re-experiencing this memory in some way. Does it make you feel any lighter? Any freer? More joyful? And if it doesn't, perhaps choose another memory. You're not forced to stay here after all. The point is, at any time, any one of us can stop, take a moment, and bring ourselves back to a time and place where we felt secure, where we felt whole, where we were healing, or whatever we may need to feel in that moment. If we're willing to close our eyes, focus on our breath, and let go. Take a few more seconds. Feel your breath coming in and out of your body. Be aware of your body and space. Start to notice if there are any sounds around you or anything in the environment you're in that are beginning to pull your focus back. And in your own time, on your breath, slowly open back up your eyes. Hopefully that helped you feel just a little bit more calm or grounded today. You've been listening to the BloodStream podcast. Remember to subscribe to us wherever you do that. Tell a friend about us. That's really the best way you can help spread the word. My name is Patrick James Lynch, and until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.